The spoon paused in midair as the baby stopped crying. In a quiet corner of a café, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days gently wiped milk from a tiny chin, unaware that a woman standing behind him had just frozen in shock. Her breath caught. Her eyes filled. And in that moment, everything she believed about power, pride, and kindness was about to be shaken. Before we go any further, if stories about unexpected kindness and real human connection move you the way they move us, take a second to subscribe to Kindness Tales. We'd love for you to like this story, and share your thoughts in the comments as you listen along, because stories like this are even better when they're shared. She hadn't planned to stop at that cafe. Her driver usually brought her coffee from a private place across town, somewhere quiet and polished where no one stared. But that morning had unraveled before it even began. The baby had cried through the night, the nanny had called in sick, and the house felt too big and too empty. So she told the driver to pull over when she saw the small neighborhood cafe glowing warm against the gray morning. She stepped inside wearing simple jeans and a sweater, hair pulled back, trying to look like any other tired single mom. Very few people knew she was one of the youngest billionaires in the country, having built a tech empire after her husband's sudden death years earlier. Even fewer knew how lonely that success had been. Money could solve almost anything, except the ache that came from raising a child without a partner, and the constant fear of doing it wrong. The cafe smelled like fresh bread and burnt coffee, and it hummed with quiet conversations. Parents with strollers, a couple of nurses in scrubs, a man in a construction jacket scrolling on his phone. She ordered, then turned, gently bouncing her baby against her shoulder. That's when she saw him. He sat alone at a small table near the window, shoulders hunched, dark circles under his eyes. A diaper bag sat open at his feet, its zipper broken. He was holding a baby bottle in one hand and supporting a tiny baby with the other, whispering soft, clumsy reassurances. His clothes were clean but worn, and his shoes looked like they'd seen too many rainy days. The baby fussed, and he panicked just a little, glancing around before focusing back, murmuring that everything was okay, that Daddy was right here. He adjusted the bottle, wiped the baby's cheek with his thumb, and smiled with a tenderness so raw it made her chest tighten. She didn't know why it hit her so hard. Maybe because she'd been told 100 times that men like him didn't exist. Or maybe because she recognized that look. The look of someone holding their whole world in their arms while feeling completely unprepared. She took a seat nearby without realizing she was moving. Her baby stirred, and the man looked up, offering a tired but genuine smile. He apologized under his breath for the noise, even though no one had complained. She shook her head and said she understood. They shared a brief laugh, the kind that comes from mutual exhaustion. They started talking the way strangers sometimes do when babies break down all barriers. He mentioned it was his first time feeding his daughter in public. He was still getting used to doing everything on his own. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and he looked embarrassed, like he'd shared too much. She nodded slowly and said she understood that too. She didn't mention boardrooms or private jets. She didn't mention the charity foundations or the headlines. She just said being a single parent could make the smallest tasks feel like climbing a mountain. As they talked, she noticed the little things. His hands were rough, likely from long hours of work. His phone screen was cracked. When his baby finished the bottle, he carefully burped her, holding her upright and patting her back with a patience that suggested practice earned through necessity, not choice. Eventually, the barista called out his name for a refill he hadn't realized he ordered. He winced and admitted he'd been up since 4 in the morning after his babysitter canceled last minute. He worked nights as a hospital janitor, he said quietly, and mornings were the hardest. Sleep came in pieces. She felt something twist inside her. Not pity. Respect. When she offered to watch his baby for a moment so he could grab his coffee, he hesitated. Then he looked at her face, at the sincerity there, and nodded. He placed his daughter gently in her arms, explaining how she liked to be held. The baby settled almost instantly, curling her tiny fingers into the fabric of the woman's sweater. The woman froze again, this time for a different reason. The weight of another child. The trust. The simplicity of it. When he returned, surprised to see his daughter calm, he laughed softly and thanked her. He apologized again, for everything and nothing. She handed the baby back reluctantly, feeling a strange pull she couldn't explain. They talked a bit longer, about sleepless nights and baby formula prices and how parenting books never seem to prepare you for real life. He mentioned how his wife had passed during childbirth, the words heavy but practiced, as if he'd learned to say them without breaking. He didn't ask for sympathy. He just stated it as fact. She swallowed hard, thinking of her own loss. Different circumstances, same absence. When it was time to leave, she surprised herself by asking if he ever needed help. Not money, she clarified quickly, seeing his shoulders tense. Just help. A meal. Someone to watch his baby if things got overwhelming. He looked at her for a long moment, pride and exhaustion wrestling in his eyes. Then he nodded and said maybe. He thanked her again, like it mattered. They exchanged numbers. Just in case. Days passed. Then weeks. She thought about him more than she expected. About the way he'd held his baby like she was the most precious thing in the room. About how kindness had flowed so naturally from him without any audience. One afternoon, she texted to check in. He replied hours later, apologizing, explaining his daughter had a fever and he'd missed a shift because he couldn't find childcare. He added a smiley face like he didn't want her to worry. She did worry. And she acted. Without fanfare, she sent groceries to his address after asking casually where he lived. She connected him with a pediatrician friend. She offered rides when his car broke down. Each time, she made it seem small, normal. Each time, he thanked her like it was a miracle. What he didn't know was that she'd quietly covered his overdue rent 1 month, working through a foundation so he'd never feel indebted. He never asked. She never told. Their friendship grew slowly, carefully. Playdates at the park. Coffee on better mornings. Conversations that drifted from babies to dreams that had been shelved but not forgotten. He talked about wanting to go back to school for nursing someday. She talked about how success sometimes felt hollow without someone to share it with. He still had no idea who she really was. The truth came out accidentally, on a rainy afternoon at a community fundraiser he'd volunteered to clean up after. He recognized her on a banner, smiling confidently beside a logo that had changed his life without him realizing it. His stomach dropped. When he confronted her later, his voice shook, not with anger, but hurt. He asked why she hadn't told him. He asked if any of the kindness had been real. She listened. Then she told him everything. About hiding because she was tired of being treated like a wallet. About seeing him that first morning and feeling human again. About how kindness wasn't kindness if it made someone feel small. There were tears. Long silences. And finally, understanding. Their lives didn't suddenly turn into a fairy tale. They were still single parents, still tired, still imperfect. But something solid had formed between them, built on honesty and shared struggle. Months later, he started nursing school with a scholarship she'd helped create for single parents, though he only learned after accepting it that her foundation funded it. This time, he laughed and shook his head, calling her impossible. This time, it felt right. In the end, what changed everything wasn't money or status. It was one tired dad feeding his baby in a cafe, and one woman who chose to see him, really see him, instead of looking away. Years from now, they would both say that moment reminded them of something simple and powerful. That kindness doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, in small corners of ordinary days. It asks nothing in return, yet somehow gives everything. And maybe that's the real lesson here. You never know when a small act of care, a shared smile, or a moment of understanding might change the course of someone's life, including your own. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters. And if you've witnessed or lived a moment like this, we'd love to hear your story in the comments, because the world always needs more reasons to believe in good hearts.